Hey everybody, I'm Chucky. This is Jason. We're in Red Rock's Racing Sportsbook for the sports betting podcast, Bookends. And I guess before we kind of dive into this week's games, Jay, all I can say about last week was every dog had its day. The puppies were definitely barking, and it was a dog day afternoon in both pro and college football. It was just amazing. I know you got some cool stats on how many big favorites actually went down in college football.
We talk a lot about when things are going right for the public and when the guests are cashing a lot of tickets, and this weekend wasn't one of those weekends for the betting public. The books did very well, and when you talk about those underdogs coming in, specifically college football, we had 7 underdogs of 10 points or more that not only covered, but obviously win the game outright. Georgia Southern.
Ranked teams, though, too.
Yeah.
Right.
Georgia Southern, 22.5-point dog, beats Nebraska. Kansas, 14.5-point dog, beats West Virginia. Middle Tennessee State, 14.5-point dog, beats Colorado State. Washington State, 17.5-point dog, beats Wisconsin. App State, 17.5-point dog, beats Texas A&M. Marshall, 20.5-point dog, beats Notre Dame. And Duke, a 10.5-point dog, beats Northwestern. And maybe the biggest one of all that could have happened was Texas as a 20-point dog. Could have knocked off Alabama. So it was really just a monster week. Look at those upsets. So when you look at this week's schedule, and again, most likely not going to happen 2 weeks in a row, but don't be afraid to look at those teams that are 14 to 17-point dogs and take them on the money line at those big prices, because obviously we can see that this type of stuff does happen.
I think especially early in the season, I think when you look at college and pro, a lot of what the line is projected at is based on what's on paper. We haven't seen these teams play yet or these schools play yet, so it takes a few weeks to kind of get a better gauge for them. But before we kind of dive into some of the stats, I have to give a shout out to one of our new hub supervisors, Brandon, who's a Georgia Southern grad, so nobody was happier than him. They were able to pull out that big upset and win outright against Nebraska. So let's go ahead and jump in it, and let's start off with Oklahoma and Nebraska. Oklahoma's an 11-point favorite. 94% of the tickets are on Oklahoma, an overwhelming amount. However, Oklahoma is 0-4-1 against the spread since the start of last season on the road. Nebraska 0-3 against the number this year. So something has to give when these two teams meet up.
Yeah, and obviously Scott Frost getting terminated. They haven't looked good. They lose the game in Dublin to Northwestern, then they play some soft teams.
Beat North Dakota, right.
Struggle against North Dakota, and then obviously get knocked off. Oklahoma does have Dylan Gabriel, a transfer from UCF, a Heisman candidate that they want to put up the points on the board, but this is really going to be to see how Nebraska reacts to Scott Frost's termination, and if those kids kind of rally behind the new coach and play, and obviously them being at home.
He doesn't just want the interim job, he wants it full time.
Being at home, that fan base, who knows, maybe getting rid of Frost will incite some team rally,
right.
But it can go either way. So I think it's really how Nebraska responds to the change.
I think there was a lot of hype for Nebraska this year going into the season. A really good recruiting class was bringing in Thompson at quarterback, and I think expectations were sky high. They were a huge favorite against Northwestern, as you touched on, in that game in Ireland, and they had clobbered Northwestern last year, I think like 56-7. So getting beat outright there, again struggling with North Dakota, and then losing this past weekend really was a bad sign, and I think they had no choice but to go ahead and move on from Frost. It's strange, but we had looked at it, and there was a way difference in the buyout amount had Frost still been there October 1st. It's obvious they didn't have an appetite to keep him around that much longer.
No, I think the boosters were screaming from the rooftops that it was time to go, and they were willing to eat that contract.
So let's jump in another game right now. That's number 22, Penn State and Auburn. So it's kind of an interesting matchup here, as Penn State's a 3-point favorite on the road. 64% of the tickets are on Penn State. But I'm going to give you kind of an interesting stat here for Auburn. Auburn is 0-5 against the spread in their last 5 non-conference games. They're at home here, and they're getting a field goal.
Well, for Auburn, it really comes down to Tank Bigsby. He's their big running back, got to be able to run the football. TJ Finley, their quarterback, one of the biggest quarterbacks in college football. I think he's 6'7". He's had some turnover problems. They struggled last week against San Jose State, a team that they should really kind of be able to put a whooping on. They let them in the game. Penn State, obviously, their first game beat Purdue on the road in a really tight, contested game, and then they go and blow out Ohio. So this will be a test to see how a Big Ten team travels down into SEC country and really is going to have to stop that running game, because I expect Auburn to pound the ball with Tank Bigsby.
They're going to try, but again, not a lot of success in out-of-conference games. 0-5, their last 5 against the number. Let's jump now. Look at BYU and Oregon. BYU had that big win last week against Baylor. 66% of the tickets are on BYU. getting points in this one. Kind of a couple of interesting trends here, too. Oregon has failed to cover in each of its last 4 games against a ranked opponent. BYU is 10-4 against the number in their last 14 in the role of an underdog. And again, they come off that big win against Baylor in one of the late games on Saturday night.
Yeah, and this is one of the games I have circled as a game I really want to watch. I think it's an interesting game. Bo Nix and Oregon, obviously, they looked atrocious in their opener neutral site against Georgia, losing 49-3 and just being completely outplayed and dominated.
Very tough place to play
there. The Georgia Bulldogs, and then going and putting up 70 points against a Little Sisters of the Poor last week. BYU looked really, really good going on the road, beat South Florida up, scored over 50 points, and then obviously at home in an incredible game against Baylor, back and forth, incredible, a full house there at BYU. They were without a couple of their players.
Wide receivers, right.
Nuku missed the game. Jaron Hall played fantastic. This just seems like a spot where BYU really played an emotional game last week and now is going up to what is arguably going to be a really frustrated Oregon team with that opening loss to Georgia. Bo Nix is a good quarterback. They should be able to move the football, but I do expect this to be a tight ball game coming down to a mistake here, a muff punt, something like that that's going to dictate who wins this ball game.
Well, you know, in Oregon's home, the Ducks are quacking. So this is a tough place to go in and play, especially them coming off a loss like that and really struggling. Look at another game here, Michigan State and Washington. This game here, Michigan State is getting points at Washington. 76% of the tickets are on the underdog here, Michigan State. A couple of interesting trends here, too, regarding the total. The total in this game is 56.5. Washington, their last 11 games that they've played against ranked teams, 9-2 towards the under. We gave you a big trend last week, and that was Southern Cal, who had gone over at all 3 games against Stanford when the total was 60 points or more. This game here, everything is trending towards it being an under when these two teams play, especially Washington at home against a ranked opponent, 9-2 against the number for the under.
Yeah, and this is one of those interesting scenarios where you have the number 11th ranked Michigan State going into Washington, and they're an underdog. So a little bit of a surprise there when you look at the rankings and what the number is. And Washington, I don't think wants to be that under team as much as they have been in the past. They get Michael Penix, the transfer from Indiana, so he's got a little bit of familiarity with playing Michigan State. And he's being asked to really put up some more points and lead that Washington football team to being a higher scoring team. One of the things that's interesting for me for this game is there's actually a little bit of a local flair to this game. Young man Jeremy Bernard, who played his high school football at Liberty, is now a freshman at Michigan State, but he originally committed to Washington and then changed and decommitted from Washington and moved over to Michigan State after the coaching change. So I think it'll be an interesting game to see Jeremy Bernard here. And he's playing a bunch of Michigan State. He's already scored a touchdown. So congratulations and good luck to Jeremy Bernard from Michigan State. Again, a kid out of Liberty here in Henderson, Nevada.
There's a couple of other big college games on the slate as well this weekend, guys, to kind of take a look at the Texas A&M, Miami of Florida game. UNLV's a home favorite this week against North Texas. But before we kind of dive into anything more, real quick on last man standing for college. 2908 entered. Almost half are gone now. 1,500 guests exactly are left in the college football last man standing to win $100,000.
Yeah, and when you talk about a couple games that are left, I really think this is a redemption weekend for 2 of the teams specifically that we talked about that had bad losses in Texas A&M against Miami of Florida and Notre Dame against Cal. They've got to find a way to get off the table. We talked about Notre Dame now. There are 3 losses under Marcus Freeman, 2 in a row this year. He's got to find a way to beat this Cal
Notre
team.
Dame new coach had ever started 0-3. So he's really looking for that first win.
The other big game for me this weekend is Mississippi State LSU. Will Rogers has moved himself up. He's the quarterback for Mississippi State. Threw for over 400 yards in their opener against Memphis, over 300 yards last week against Arizona. I think he's got 9 touchdowns to no interceptions. So this is a big stage for a Mississippi State quarterback to go and play at LSU against Jaden Daniels. Again, from the LSU standpoint, this could be a shootout here. That, again, could put one of these guys on the Heisman Trophy candidate map.
Yeah, really a lot of good college football games this week. And guys, before we kind of go into the next category and break down the pros, just a reminder, we love it when all you guys come out and enjoy everything we have to offer, not only here at Red Rock, but all of our race and sports books. But I know we had huge crowds. There was some long lines. Don't forget, get signed up for STN Sports. It really does bring the sports book to you. We still have up to that $500 bonus going on right now. And if you're in the room and it's packed, there's kiosks at all of our properties that really expedite the process. So if you don't know how to use it, grab one of our team members. We'll be happy to show you guys how to use it again. Get signed up for STN Sports or try one of our kiosks out. They really do help on a busy Saturday and Sunday when our sports books are really packed for those big days.
Let alone just the amount of props and stuff that you can look at from a football standpoint.
And it's all the current lines, not the opening
lines. When you walk in
lines.
the book, it's obviously, we got the odds for the games on the boards, but you're not seeing the hundreds of props that we're offering unless you find those sheets. If you get on the app, you're going to see those props, be able to bet them right at the palm of your hand.
So again, don't forget, get signed up. We still have that $500 bonus going on, and there's kiosks located on all of our properties, which make it so easy. We're going to come back, and we're going to kind of jump into the pros a little bit, guys. So stay put. We'll be right back with the Sports Bookmaking Podcast, Bookends, in a few minutes.
One of country music's finest.
Somebody else will find on.
Justin Moore, live in concert. October 13th, 8 p.m. The Sandbar at Red Rock Resort. On sale now. Purchase tickets at any Station Casinos Reward Center. Online at stationcasinoslive.com or ticketmaster.com.
He can't even bait a hook.
Justin Moore live.
Hey everybody, we're back with the Sports Betting Podcast Bookends, and we're going to kind of dive into the pros a little bit now. But before we do, just for you guys that were in last man standing, 6284 entrants were in the contest, 2985 were out. And I think, Jay, that's a product of the big upsets we saw in week one.
Yeah, much like we just talked about in college, the upsets in pro definitely knocked a lot of people out. When we talk about outright winners from a dog standpoint, 4 favorites of kind of around that touchdown standpoint. The Bears a 7-point dog to the Niners, Steelers a 7.5-point dog to the Bengals, Giants a 6.5-point dog to Tennessee, and then on Monday night we saw Seattle as a 7-point dog knock off Denver. Knocked out a lot of people that were playing those teams. So kind of half-life the contest, and again, much like we saw in college, the dogs were barking and
right.
Some money to be made on those underdogs.
I think anytime kind of over the last couple of years when you can get the Bears and Giants to win outright on the same week, it's usually a good sign for our side of the counter. Let's kick it off with the big Thursday night AFC West matchup. We talked about all 4 of those teams over the last few weeks, how good they are. I don't think Patrick Mahomes or Justin Herbert missed a beat. They lived up to their billing. Both guys looked phenomenal in their first game. The Chargers went into Kansas City last year, week 2, and won that game. Mahomes had 5 touchdown passes this past Sunday without Tyreek Hill. 74% of the tickets are on the Chiefs, and not surprising, 76% of the tickets are on the over. Again, these two teams look really good. You expect a lot of scoring. Keenan Allen's definitely out for the Chargers, and Buckner, the kicker, is definitely out for the Chiefs. What do you think of this game on Monday or Thursday night?
I think that those 2 injuries are really big, especially the Chiefs missing their kicker. Obviously, when you're laying 3.5 and
means
4
they just have to go for it a lot more.
Well, they're going to pick up. I think Matt Amendola is the name of the guy that they picked up. That's going to be their kicker. Both these offenses look good. A little bit of potential is that I think the Cardinals are going to make a lot of offenses look good, and I think the Raiders secondary is going to make a lot of offenses on that side look good. So they weren't necessarily playing 2 defensive juggernauts in that game. I think that the development of what we saw from the Chargers, obviously Keenan Allen went out pretty early in that game, and DeAndre Carter came out of nowhere. We obviously expected a lot out of Josh Palmer, as he's been one of our sleepers.
He's supposed to start this week.
And Gerald Everett, the tight end, looked absolutely fantastic to go along what they already have with Mike Williams and Austin Eckler. So the Chargers really have the tools on offense to be able to play with the Chiefs, and really with Mack and Bosa on the defensive side of things.
Mack had 3 sacks.
They should be able to get that pressure on Mahomes that the Cardinals weren't able to get. But again, Patrick Mahomes does Patrick Mahomes types things, and obviously loses Tyreek Hill and finds every receiver under the sun, uses his running backs, and just embarrasses the Cardinals. And so he's got a familiarity with the Chargers, and they'll game plan up for the Chargers. But I wouldn't expect, as much as we talk about the great offenses that these teams have and the up and down game that they have, I think that they might want to keep each other's offense off the field, and I think we might see a slower pace to this game. That doesn't mean that the game can't go over, because these teams can score so quick, but I do think we'll see a little bit of a reduced pace in this game potentially.
Bettors definitely like it over so far with the amount of tickets we've seen. And before we kind of dive into some of the other games, one of the interesting kind of stats is you look at teams like the Cowboys, the Patriots, the Titans, the Bengals, the Rams, the 49ers, the Cardinals, just to name a few, all started 0-1. Last year, teams that started 0-2, guess how many made the playoffs? absolutely zero, right? So I think it's a big week for some of these teams to kind of bounce back because if you are 0-2, even though it's a 17-week schedule, it really does put you behind the 8 ball somewhat. So a lot of teams had high expectations coming in. A lot of these teams that lost are big favorites this week, but another loss would be catastrophic, I think, to start 0-2 for some of these teams that were expected to be serious Super Bowl contenders.
I'll call it that some 0-2 team this year will make the playoffs.
Probably right.
The way the schedule is dictated,
right.
the 17 games.
There's so much parity, too.
And
right.
the balance of the NFL. It's just you don't get that good quick start, and you'll find a way later in the season. We had some big monster, the Packers going down, not obviously they're a 10-point favorite this week. I think we'll see an 0-2 team make the playoffs.
All right, so now we're going to look at another big game, and this is the NFC West. It's Bucs Saints. Both teams I thought looked decent. Tampa Bay had the win against the Cowboys on prime time. You look at the Saints, who were able to win a last-second field goal against the Falcons. But the bettors are really backing Tampa here. 66% of the tickets are on Tampa. They're betting the over in this game. Yet the number has come down a little bit. But I think the most interesting trend is that since Tom Brady became the starting quarterback for Tampa Bay, he is exactly 0 wins against the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, he hasn't had a lot of fun traveling to New Orleans. I think this year, when you look at it, though, this New Orleans defense, in particular, their first game against Atlanta, they really had a hard time blocking that Atlanta up front. Jameis Winston was under a lot of pressure, really didn't find their groove till late in that fourth quarter, found Michael Thomas for a couple touchdowns. And when you compare what Tampa was able to do against that Dallas defensive front. Now, obviously, we know Dak went down. We know that they were really lack of receiving core, but Tampa really dominated them up front, and that's the strength of that Tampa Bay Buccaneer team. To where are they going to be able to put that pressure on the Saints? Are they going to be able to get to Jameis Winston, stop Kamara out of the backfield, maybe Taysom Hill? We saw Taysom Hill have some big games. But the fact that Atlanta, who we don't expect to be a particularly strong defensive team, was able to give the Saints trouble for 3 quarters, doesn't bode well against this Buccaneer team.
It was a road game for the Saints, though, where they're back home right now, and in the Dome, they always play really well. The crowd's on their side. The crowd noise will be against Tom Brady in this case, but I thought Michael Thomas played really well for not really taking a snap for a couple of years.
The other thing I didn't like about the Saints was they allowed Cordell Patterson for the Falcons to rush for 120 yards. If you're going to allow him to rush for 120 yards, and now we're going to see Leonard Fournette, who was able to have a big game. I think he rushed for 127 yards against Dallas. And really, Tampa was very vanilla and generic in their offense. They kind of got the lead. They saw that Dallas wasn't able to do much of anything on offense, and they kind of had 2 runs and then a pass and some big plays to Mike Evans, some big plays to Julio Jones. Obviously, Godwin probably not going to play again this week, but I think that we'll see
Russell Gage,
Brady use a little bit more of that offense this coming week.
Yeah, so that's a really intriguing matchup, I think, for both these two teams, just because Tampa has not had a whole lot of success against the Saints since Brady became the Bucs quarterback. Well, Falcons-Rams now. Rams come off that loss. They've had extra time to prepare. Kind of surprising, though, that more than 50% of the tickets are on the Falcons, plus that big number, getting double digits. Can the Rams bounce back after that loss against the Bills? Cam Akers didn't look good. Allen Robinson didn't look good. Matt Stafford didn't look good. They're going to need a better showing here. We know that Atlanta is a team they're expected to beat, but this Ram team was not impressive on that opening Thursday night.
Yeah, and people remember what they saw last, and what they saw last was just a failure by the Rams. And I said it this week when we were working on numbers that I really don't think that this Rams team is as bad as we think they are. I think that they played a Buffalo Bills team who's as good as we think they are on all sides of the ball.
They're definitely as good as advertised.
Defensively, offensively, the Bills, I think, are the best team in the National Football League. The Rams, and I don't know that you say Cam Akers didn't play well, Allen Robinson didn't play. I didn't even see them play. I mean, they weren't really involved in the game plan. Allen Robinson basically, put in some cardio work running routes and never really had the ball.
We expected Akers to start, and it was Henderson.
Yeah, Akers to Henderson was a big difference there. Obviously, Cooper Kupp is extremely dangerous on any time that they touch the football. Really looked a lot for Tyler Higbee. I think he had 11 targets from Stafford in the game, and really that was because Robinson was kind of absent in the offense. Falcons were surprising. I don't think that anybody expected them to be leading the Saints and really be in that game.
Right.
And now going on the road to what's got to be a very frustrated Rams team, both
Plus the
both
extra time,
offensively
I think,
and
really
defensively.
helps them a lot.
Jalen Ramsey gets lit up by that Bills offense. I really expect a big effort here from the Rams, but that's why you see the big number.
You would expect that, at least. And again, the extra time, I think, will really help them, especially Stafford, who really didn't play much in the preseason, gets a little bit more rest. All right, we're going to stay now in the NFC West, and it's Seahawks and 49ers. And what's interesting about this game is that the only team that has a win in the NFC West is the Seattle Seahawks. You look at the Cardinals, the Rams, and the 49ers, they all got beat opening week. Now, Seattle had all the emotion of the 12th man, Russell Wilson coming back home. We know Denver fumbled twice on the 1-yard line, but they still won the game, which I think was a huge emotional win for them. San Francisco, who a lot of people think are a Super Bowl caliber team, can challenge in the NFC West, didn't play well, especially in the second half against the Bears. I know the weather was horrible, but it was horrible for both teams, not just San Francisco. I think there's a lot of pressure on Trey Lance to really bounce back in this game and play a good game because they didn't part ways with Jimmy Garoppolo in the offseason. He's still there, and I think how many weeks can you go if Lance continues to struggle? You heard Bear players say, we wanted to make Lance beat us in the pocket and with his arm. He wasn't able to do that. He missed Ayuk on a number of times when he was open, had a lot of bad throws in that game. I know, again, weather was bad, but it was bad for both teams. Fields made a couple of really good long passes in the second half. I think a lot of pressure on Trey Lance. You got high ticket count, though, here on the Seahawks plus the points. Over 70% of the tickets like the dog here, which is a little surprising.
Well, and this has been the big move of the week so far. A lot of money coming in on Seattle, plus 10, Seattle plus 9.5. We've seen some really big bets on the Seahawks in this instance. And again, it stems from the Niners not looking good, only putting up 10 points at Chicago. I got to, as much as a Bear fan in me, I got to wipe that game clean from a standpoint of the Niners because it was just a torrential downpour and Elijah Mitchell goes down early in the game. And I don't think that they were able to do what they wanted to do. I think this is a good spot for them to come back home against Seattle after a short week. And as much as Seattle won that game, I don't think they went. Geno Smith wasn't bad, but they didn't win the game. To me, Denver lost the game. With the fumbles key at the goal line, with the questionable field call, some play calling here and there, I thought that Denver had a much bigger chance to exploit some of the holes in that Seattle secondary.
Yeah, I think it's a big game, though, for Trey Lance. I think you really expect him to have a bounce-back week. Not sure if George Kittle's going to play in this game or not. I think he really could use him underneath a little bit. Looks like Jeff Wilson will get to start at running back, with Mitchell being on the IR for probably 8 to 10 weeks.
Yeah, and we talk about Jeff Wilson and Elijah Mitchell being going out. It won't surprise me at all if we go back to late last year and we see a lot of Deebo Samuel in that backfield getting some carries.
All right, so we've kind of looked at, a few of the key games. We're going to jump to the primetime games now. We've got, arguably the biggest or the oldest rivalry in pro football on Sunday night, and that's the Bears at the Packers. We know, the famous words, I own you, that Aaron Rodgers, spilled out on a primetime game last year. He's 6-0 in the last 6 games against the Bears. He's got the best winning percentage against any team that he's played against the Bears. The Packers lost week 1 last year and bounced back. They lost week 1 this year. Look for them to bounce back. They're a huge double-digit favorite against the Bears. But similar to what we talked about in some of the other games, you've got 70% of the tickets are on the Bears getting the points in this game. I know, again, 2 public teams. Justin Fields played a good game with all things considered with the weather, but are the Bears good enough to go into Lambeau and keep this game competitive?
Well, I think when we talk, again, what we saw last. We saw a Packer team that really struggled against the Vikings. We saw a Packer team that we were asking ourselves with the departure of Devontae Adams, who's going to step up? And no one really stepped up. And then when you combine that with, we just saw 4 teams that were touchdown dogs go and win games outright, and now we have a bunch of 10-point underdogs again this week. People are saying, I'll take the 10 points because it seems like that's a possibility in the NFL. And, from the Bears standpoint, I think that the weather really neutralized them against San Francisco, and San Francisco wasn't able to have that passing game. I really think that Rodgers, of all the complaining and the bad first week, it won't surprise me at all if Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, and if we see Alan Lazard back on the field this week, who we assume was going to be his number one. I'm kind of afraid for the Bears going in there on Sunday night that Aaron Rodgers will get his redemption and be able to put up some big numbers.
My guess is, even though you've seen some of the early play on the Bears plus the points, that from our side of the counter, we're going to be Bears fans on Sunday night.
Yeah, and again, they gained some confidence. Justin Fields didn't play particularly well, but he was able to hit some big pass plays. Montgomery, controlled the ball.
Him and Herbert. They really used both running backs effectively in that game.
I just think Green Bay, didn't play particularly well in covering Justin Jefferson. They really had a monster problem covering Justin Jefferson. And the Bears, despite the fact that they have Mooney, they don't have those type of playmakers in the receiving corps to exploit the Green Bay defense. They're going to need to do it with more of a balanced attack. Dalvin Cook had 90 yards, but again, that was because Minnesota got kind of up and were grinding things out. The Bears are going to have to get a quick start here, otherwise it could be Rodgers rolling.
And it's probably, if you're a Bear team, the last thing you want to do is have to play Aaron Rodgers on national television coming off a loss. So, they got a chip on their shoulder. Monday night, which is one of my favorite Monday nights, is when you have a doubleheader. We usually start the season off with a Monday night doubleheader. This year it's week 2. Both games kind of go simultaneously. I think kickoff is 45 minutes apart instead of one after the other. But Bills-Titans, they played a primetime game last year. If you guys remember, Bills were way down. They came back. They went for it. They were down by 3. They went for it on 4th and 1 from the 1-yard line or the 1-inch line. Could have kicked the field goal to tie, sent it to overtime. They went for it. Josh Allen slipped and fell. Tennessee won this game. As you mentioned earlier, Buffalo just looks so good right now. Odds-on favorite for our big board to win the Super Bowl. And they're a huge favorite here, a double-digit favorite against the Titans. And over 70% of the tickets are on the Bills here being that big favorite.
Yeah, and it won't surprise me at all come Monday if you're talking about 80 to 85% of the tickets being on the Bills. I don't know what's going to enamor anybody to the Titans on a Monday night after their loss to the Giants, where we saw Saquon Barkley kind of just run wild on them. The loss of A.J. Brown, not really having those guys in the receiving corps. Robert Woods and Treylon Burks really didn't push the field down and be able to exploit the Giants. So I think Tennessee potentially could be in troubles on all fronts here. Obviously, if Derrick Henry is able to get going, but I think that Buffalo is going to make a concentrated effort on stopping Henry. That the Titans were able to get Hilliard to sneak out of the backfield.
Don't forget, again, they beat them last year, so some revenge.
I think there's some anger in this Buffalo team. I don't think there's quit in this Buffalo team. It won't surprise me. I said it last week. It won't surprise me to watch this Buffalo team go 16-1 or 17-0. I think that they're playing with a 13-second chip on their shoulder. They're not going to let any game come down to a close game. They are going to continue to pile on points every week, look to cover every week, look to put people away. And once they get a big lead, and then you're able to send Von Miller and these guys with a big pass rush, these other teams are really in trouble. And Tennessee, of all teams, if they get down, they don't have that ability to come back.
I think when you look at Buffalo's schedule, too, I know it's only week 1, but it really isn't far-fetched to say they could go 15-2, 16-1, 17-0 based on what their schedule is. So maybe something we think about in a few weeks if Buffalo's still on a mini roll, putting that up, will they go undefeated or not. The second game, the doubleheader on Monday Night Football, to me, it's a really intriguing matchup. It's Vikings at the Eagles. These are two teams that we talked about in the offseason that we both felt could win the division, that the Vikings could supplant the Packers and the Eagles could in the Cowboys. Now, it's only week 1. But I think with the injury to Dak, it even enhances that the Eagles are really the favorite now to win the NFC East. It's only 1 week. We know the Vikings won at home against the Packers. I think that one's going to be a battle throughout the course of the season. Vikings are getting points here. 70% of the tickets are on the Vikings. Almost 68% of the tickets are on the over. What kind of intrigued me here is that although the Eagles had a big offensive showing against Detroit week 1, they scored 38 points, they couldn't stop the Detroit offense. How are they going to stop Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, and Delvin Cook in this one? I think that's why you're seeing some of the higher ticket counts on Minnesota on Monday night.
Yeah, and I think you go back on record, you can watch a bookends from probably two weeks ago, where we came out and said we think the Minnesota Vikings end up winning this division, and they supplant Green Bay as the leaders in the North. I think this is an outstanding Viking team. Justin Jefferson is clearly, with the new offense with O'Connell, is going to look like Cooper Kupp. They're going to do everything they can to get him the ball, and if that defense can kind of just hold and be solid, they're going to be a very, very good team. This is a very interesting match. This has like NFC Championship type feel to it early in the season. Outside, we respect what the Buccaneers and some of these other two teams are doing, but these two teams have a chance to be very, very good. You talked about Philadelphia's inability to kind of stop the run. DeAndre Swift ran for 144 yards against them. If Cook's able to get that kind of momentum going and get some play action passing going, that could be real trouble for the Eagles. But again, I think this Eagles, this rushing game, this three-headed monster of Sanders and Gainwell and Boston, to get a look.
Actually, it's a four-headed one if you throw Hurts in there, right?
It makes it real dangerous. And then he was really targeting A.J. Brown, who had a big game. Devontae Smith was kind of non-existent in the offense, much the way Allen Robinson looked for the Rams. It was really a Goddard to Brown, and that might have just been what the Lions were doing from a defensive standpoint. But this total, we saw it open up like 48.5 on Sunday, and now up to 52.5. This was one of the ones that when I saw the total, I said, oh, that's way too low. This could be a scoreboard operator on Red Bull on Monday night.
Yeah, we talked about how the Thursday night game, you might see a little bit different pace to the game and stay under. I don't think that's going to be the case on Monday night. I think both these teams can open it up. I think you'll see a lot of scoring on Monday night. For our side of the counter, my guess is just based on early ticket counts, we're definitely going to be rooting for the under.
Yeah, and part of Minnesota's problem, one of Minnesota's weaknesses, is their secondary. They don't really have the best secondary. And Green Bay, we saw some open receivers, some drop passes. Strangely enough, that Aaron Rodgers wasn't able to exploit that. And Eagles aren't really a team that is able to exploit a weak secondary either, as they want to run the football. So it'll be interesting from that standpoint whether they're able to go to Brown or find Devontae Smith on some big pass plays.
Yeah, it should be fun. Again, a really good slate of pro football games. Again, we have the monster Thursday night game, the big rivalry game on Sunday Night Football, and then you've got a doubleheader on Monday Night Football, which is great. Before we leave you guys, though, don't forget this weekend also, you've got the trilogy. You've got Alvarez and Triple G fighting on Saturday night. Baseball, you've got teams in the pennant stretches and a lot going on. We kind of talked about, too, the home runs, right? I mean, crazy right now, but,
We'll do the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, we'll do that in the good, the bad, and the ugly. But one thing before we kind of get into our two favorite segments, and that's Stephen Money's Fantasy Football Fever and the good, the bad, and the ugly, is hats off to our Las Vegas Aces. They're now up 2-0. Plum Founder game in Game 2. They really were in charge the entire second half of that game, and they're one win away from giving Vegas our first, kind of major sport championship. So congratulations, Aces. Keep rolling. I'm not sure about the schedule makers. The next game is Thursday night against Thursday Night Football. But, hey, congratulations, Aces. You're one game away.
Yeah, Aja Wilson came out after that Game 1 and kind of gave a little jab to Kelsey Plum that she needed to pick up her game.
And she did.
She definitely did in Game 2. And the three-headed monster there of Gray and Wilson and Plum has been absolutely fantastic. We did have Chelsea Gray kind of injure her ankle late in the game there, so kind of watch for that status and see if we'll see if the Sun can rebound in Game 3.
But check out the mobile app and everything over the counter too, because for Game 3 there'll be a lot of props up for the Aces Suns game. We'll be right back for our final segment of Bookends, and again, it's our favorite one. It's the fantasy football one and the good, the bad, and the ugly.
It's football season, baby. And you know what that means. It's time to bet your buns off. And when it comes to sports betting, you better bet with the STN Sports App. So what in the heck are you waiting for? Download the STN Sports App today and trust the local favorite.
Hey everybody, we're back for the final segment of Bookends right now, and it's Jay and my favorite segment. It features two of the kind of cool little things that we love to end the show with, and that's Stephen Money's Fantasy Football Fever and the good, the bad, the ugly. We're going to start it off with Stephen Money here, and it's our fantasy teams we really like this week. I love at quarterback, and I know we touched on it a little bit in the pro football segment. I love Kirk Cousins. Again, you look at what he has with Justin Jefferson, the movement that O'Connell has with him, and the fact that Philadelphia couldn't stop Detroit. I think this is a tailor-made opportunity for Cousins to go off at least 3 touchdowns on Monday night and over 300 yards passing against that Philadelphia defense that couldn't stop Jared Goff and DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, and in this segment, we're not trying to give you those guys that are obviously top 10 quarterbacks,
Right.
top 10 running backs. Trying to go a little bit deeper.
A little bit outside.
Somebody a little bit off the cuff. And so you go to Cousins. I'm going to go to Derek Carr,
Okay.
who didn't play a particularly good game down in Los Angeles against the Chargers, but get to come back home this week against the Arizona Cardinals, who we just watched Patrick Mahomes throw for 360 yards and 5 TDs. I think that he gets back into Allegiant Stadium, gets to show everybody his shiny new Devontae Adams. He targeted him 17 times, I believe, in last week's game. But I think that between Waller, Renfro, Adams, and I do think that he'll use those guys out of the backfield as well, catching some passes. I think we're going to see Derek Carr put up some monster numbers this week.
Okay, those are two quarterbacks we kind of like. Running back now, he's a popular choice, but he's not kind of in that top maybe 5 to 8 range. I'm going to go Aaron Jones of the Packers. I think that Aaron Rodgers is going to go back to his kind of comfort level, and Jones isn't only going to run the ball. He's going to catch a lot of short passes. You're going to have a young Bear defense that's over-aggressive, trying to get to Rodgers. I think Aaron Jones is going to have a big game, both rushing and receiving, on Sunday night against the Bears.
Yeah, and if they can get a lead, if the Packers get a lead, you're likely to see Jones and Dillon kind of run that ball, eat the clock out, get some good third and fourth quarter yardage. I'm going to go to exactly what I think is going to happen in the Cleveland Brown game, and I'm going to recommend Kareem Hunt this week. We saw him score 2 touchdowns last week against Carolina. Obviously a two-headed monster there with Chubb. But they play the Jets this week, and if Cleveland's able to get a little bit of a lead, I think we can see Chubb and Hunt have some big touchdowns. And really, those guys are getting equal work. So for as far as Chubb went in the in the draft versus Hunt, Hunt's a real sleeper. He seems to be getting just as much work, and he seems to be getting more of the passing work and kind of stealing some of those touchdowns.
Okay, I can see that as well. Receivers now, I'm not going to quite go down the board as much. I'm going to go Deebo Samuel, though. I just think that with the way San Francisco played week 1 and the weather conditions, that Trey Lance bounces back. I know that Elijah Mitchell is injured as well. I think you're going to see Deebo Samuel both from the backfield running the ball, catching passes. I think Samuel has a big game against the Seahawks on Sunday.
I'm going to go a little bit deeper and go to DJ Moore from Carolina. Didn't put up particularly big game. Robbie Anderson had their big touchdown pass. Obviously, we know what McCaffrey can do in that offense. But I don't think the Giants really saw a number 1 receiver in playing Tennessee. They were able to steal the game from the Titans. Tannehill really didn't push things down the field. I think we see Baker Mayfield, who was obviously under a ton of pressure playing Cleveland and the whole revenge story and everything going on there. I think that they go to New York, and strangely enough, we see the New York Giants favored in this game, but I think that DJ Moore could put up some big numbers against the Giants.
All right, now we're going to go to our sleepers, and I gave you guys a sleeper wide receiver before the season started, and that was Joshua Palmer of the Chargers. I'm going to stick with him as my big sleeper this week because now you've got Keenan Allen out, so he's going to start. Last year there was 3 games that Allen or Williams didn't start, and all 3 of those games Joshua Palmer scored a touchdown. I think this Chiefs-Charger game still could be a high-scoring game. Maybe not get over the total, but it's going to be a high-scoring game. I look for Joshua Palmer of the Chargers to be my kind of sleeper wideout way down the board, to have at least a touchdown and over 65 yards receiving in that game against the Chiefs on Thursday night.
I'm going to go against a trend that we dug up with the Indianapolis Colts. They're a 4-point favorite at Jacksonville, but Indianapolis has not won in Jacksonville since 2014, and they're in their division. So that means that they play them several times, one time a year down there every year. But I'm going to look to Nyheim Hines, the running back for the Indianapolis Colts. We all know about Jonathan Taylor and the danger that he is from an offensive standpoint. But Jacksonville really struggled against Washington this past week. They couldn't control Antonio Gibson out of the Washington backfield, and he's not even their good receiving back. That would be McKissick that normally fills that role. But Gibson had 7 receptions for 72 yards against the Jaguars, and Hines is really, that's the role that they love. I think he was 5 for 5 in receptions this week at Houston. So I look for the Indianapolis Colts to use Hines a lot out of the backfield to kind of exploit that Jaguar defense.
Yep, those are a lot of, kind of are what we like for fantasy football this week. And one last thing before we get in the good, the bad, and the ugly. We know the Bears won in a really ugly game weather-wise against the 49ers. Well, guess what? 70% chance of rain is projected in Lambeau Sunday night. Maybe you get bad conditions like that, and you see Justin Fields doing that slide across late in the game. So 10 points in weather conditions like that, maybe it's Bear-Packer weather. So, all right, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We're going to start good, and we're going to go baseball. It's all about the long ball. Mike Trout Congratulations, 7 straight games that he hit a home run. That streak ended last night. But the other 2, we've had props up on Albert Pujols and Aaron Judge. Both those guys have been on a little bit of a tear, and both have those records in striking distance right now.
Yeah, it's been unbelievable. It's a storyline every time you're kind of watching the Cardinal game, seeing if Pujols in that lineup. I'm on record taking the under 700. He's at the 697.
I took both overs.
So I'm sweating it a little bit. Judge, we saw him with a 2 home run game early this week, so obviously he's on pace now up to 57. But the long ball's down. Been exciting, and really the playoff chase kind of in general here. Obviously, we've seen the Dodgers dominating, but the wild card chases in baseball are really great.
How about Braves Mets? The National League East has really gotten interesting as well.
So we'll call some. There's some goodness going on in baseball. Some great able to watch these baseball games.
All right, now we're going to go to the bad, and bad and ugly both happen to feature college football. The bad's going to be Notre Dame. I mean, 0-3 under Marcus Freeman. They lose the bowl game last year. They lose both games this year so far. Big favorites this past weekend, and they get beat at home. Freeman needs a big-time win here. They're a big favorite at home. But my bad right now is Notre Dame football.
Yeah, and it's not that they've been bad for both games. I mean, they really played a good football game against Ohio State.
They did.
They weren't able to score a bunch of points, but defensively they played good against Ohio State, and Ohio State offense with Heisman candidates all over the place that we expected to score a ton of points. They were in that game, and I don't know if it was just we fell asleep, we didn't respect Marshall, but they just weren't able to move the football on offense. They really have some quarterback issues there, unable to stop the run, and so bad Notre Dame. We'll see if they can find a way to rebound against Cal this weekend.
Okay, and now we're going to go ugly, and Scott Frost.
I don't think there's any way to not have him as the ugly.
Right.
So much so that, what is it, $15 million, $17 million that it was worth for Nebraska to say leave now instead of leaving after October 1st.
Right.
That's how much they wanted him out of there. I know you've got the records on
he was
his overall
0-14 against ranked opponents and 10-26 in the Big Ten. I mean, 0-14 against ranked opponents. I mean, you can only understand the boosters' probably frustration there that they just couldn't go anymore in this direction. So
yeah, I mean, but it was what's more upsetting is when he coached down in Central Florida. I mean, you could have said that they won a mythical national championship. I mean, they made that undefeated run. They were absolutely fantastic. And then he goes to his alma mater. He goes to what should be his home, and they've just flopped. It's like he expected to be able to bring in recruits and be able to win.
But he did bring in recruits. They had a really good recruiting class.
Coaching, just a total a mess there in Nebraska that I don't know if they're going to be able to dig themselves out of as we move forward the rest of the season.
I'm still going to go back to that first game in Dublin. They're totally in control of that game against Northwestern, and they do that onside kick. I think everything changed from that minute on for Nebraska football, and we'll see if they can dig themselves out at all. So, guys, this is a big weekend again. Week 2 of pro football. Again, the second week of both college and pro football. The Aces having a chance to potentially win the WNBA championship. We got a big fight, Triple G and Alvarez going on, and all the baseball stuff. So it really is a great time to come on in and get signed up for STN Sports.
Yeah, and obviously, it's a Raiders home game. They were on the road last week. Obviously, from a Raider fan base standpoint here in Las Vegas, we're always what seems to be super lopsided on the Raiders game. We know we're going to get a ton of Raider money.
That number has come down a little bit, though.
Well, again, they didn't look good, but I don't think the Cardinals look particularly good either. I think that you're looking at that 5.5, 6-point spread and saying, hey, to the Raiders, kind of last year they were the cardiac kids of pulling things out, finding a way to win those games late in fourth quarters. And so as a traditional watching that happen, hey, I'll take the 5 points. Think the Raiders are still going to win, but watch them pull some kind of late miracle. But I really expect a lot of points in that game as well. Like I said, I think Carr puts on a show.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a high-scoring game too. So, guys, again, we know the book gets busy on the weekends. Don't forget about getting signed up for STN Sports, but there are kiosks located throughout all of our properties, especially around the race and sports books. Check those kiosks out. They really help expedite the process. You can be in and out in a minute. If you're not sure how to use them, just ask one of our team members. We'll be happy to show you. So, guys, again, we will see you guys next week for week 3. This is the Sports Betting Podcast Bookends. Have some fun this week. Good luck, and we'll see you guys next week.